Well, hi again for Chess-Based Workshop. My name's Steve Lopez. Welcome, and thank you for clicking on that link. Chess-Based Workshop wasn't always a video. Those of you who have been with Chess-Based and been following me long enough, I started this stuff, well, it's been about 15 years ago, and it was originally had a different name. It wasn't called Chess-Based Workshop, and it was a written article on the internet. You clicked on the link and you got a written article. And I kind of miss those days because there were things I could do with Chess-Based Workshop back then that I can't easily do now, or don't often get a chance to do now that it's a video format. I used to be able to write articles that were just about chess. It didn't have to be a feature in the program, although if I could sneak that in, that was always a good thing. But I was reminded the other day, I was in a conversation with a chess-based customer where we were talking about an article that I had written, well, it's been about 12 years ago now, about a really cool ghost story, since we're coming up on Halloween, about Frank Marshall and how he was visited by the ghost of Wilhelm Steinitz. And I did a short article about that kind of thing, and it had nothing to do with chess-based. So I don't get to do this very often anymore because I have to show you a screen like this and we have to talk about features in the program. Well, this is the new Fritz 13 we're looking at, and by the way, there are videos on the way to talk about the cool new online features. It just requires a lot more effort for me to put them together. There's some voiceover and editing work required. Normally I just do these things off the cuff. I just run a screen capture program. I don't even work with notes. I don't work with a net. I don't work with, it doesn't matter. I can fall and get crushed, and it just doesn't matter. That's why sometimes you hear me lose my train of thought. I don't use notes. I just do this off the cuff. So what we're going to talk about today is I want to show you a cool little feature in Fritz that people who play on the Play Chess server using Fritz, people who play games online against other people, may not know about. If you're a veteran, you probably know this like the back of your hand, but if you're a new player playing online, you probably don't know anything about this. So I want to show it to you now. But it's going to give me a chance to talk a little bit about history. I'm a former professional historian. Aren't you lucky you're going to get a history lesson today? I'm a former professional historian, and I love the 1800s, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 1800s. Back at that time, and of course, this is going to be a bad joke, but back at that time, Americans and people in Britain thought, well, Americans especially, thought the French were really cool. So a lot of French words came into our language. I'm not saying we don't think the French are cool now, but there's always these jokes about the French, and the French tell jokes about the Americans, and I'm sure back in ancient times the Romans told jokes about the Carthaginians. It's human nature. Excuse me, and we don't really need to go there. But back in the mid-1800s, Americans really admired the French. That's why so many French terms entered our language, particularly in specialized fields, like the military, for example. Reconnaissance, defilade, enfilade, all kinds of things. I said reconnaissance. There's a pile of words that became part of the American/English military lexicon, and that was primarily because of Napoleon. In the mid-1800s, even if people didn't like Napoleon personally or his politics, they had to admit the guy was a great general, and people studied his tactics and his strategies, and a lot of terms that the French used militarily became part of military lexicon. The same thing happened with chess. There's a lot of things that happened at that time where French words became part of the chess lexicon. I'll show you one of them, and this applies to a feature in Fritz. When you're playing a game online, let's say I'm playing a game and I'm white, and I make this move, and for some reason my opponent who's black has to think about this move, is thinking about what he wants to do. Okay? So while he's thinking, I got a pretty good idea that he's going to play either knight e4 or knight g4. This is the Budapest defense. And if he plays, he's playing a Budapest against me, and if he plays knight g4, which he's likely to do, by the way, statistically, you see it here, I already know what I want to play, which is knight f3. I can come down here and grab this knight while I'm waiting for my opponent to move on the Play Chess server and hover that knight right over the f3 square, so that if my opponent does in fact play that, I can already have the knight hanging there. I can just drop it right on that square. Okay? Oh, look, he moved really quick now. But you see what I'm talking about here. By the way, I forgot to turn the engine off. But you see what I'm talking about, which is that while I'm waiting, after I move this pawn, while I'm waiting for black to make his move, I can grab this knight and hover it over the square so that once he makes his move, I can just drop the knight right on that square. And I don't have to say j'adoube, French word. Roughly translated means I adjust. And in America, you don't often hear people say j'adoube. Usually when you touch a piece and you don't intend to move it, you say adjust. However, I used to say j'adoube back in the day, and I quit doing it, and I'll tell you why. And this is one of those chess player stories, where you talk about opponents that stick in your head and not for good reasons. I played at a club years ago where every time somebody would say j'adoube, this guy would start singing. And what he would sing is he would sing the word j'adoube to the tune of an old Dean Martin song, Strangers in the Night. So you would touch a piece, if I was to pick that knight up and go j'adoube, he'd start going j'adooby dooby doo, j'adooby dooby, dooby dooby doo. And after about the third or fourth time in one evening, you'd go, "Shut up! Stop it! Stop singing! I can't take it anymore!" So it broke me of the habit of saying j'adoube. I started saying adjust. And he finally caught on, so then whenever somebody would say adjust, he'd start singing j'adooby dooby doo anyway, and we had to stuff him in the dumpster, but that's another story. So that's a French word that became part of the worldwide, but particularly English chess lexicon. J'adoube was one of those words. And that applies to Fritz because you can grab a piece and hover it over a square while you're waiting for your opponent. Let's say I play this, I'm waiting for him to move, I'm waiting for him to move his knight, and after he does, I can just drop my knight on that square. And you don't have to say adjust or j'adoube because it's an online game. So that's a little trick that you might not know. Excuse me. Another French word, French term that doesn't get used very often, I want to illustrate with a game. We'll go over to ChessBase for this one, and I've hidden the notation so you can't see what was played, what the last move played was. But White has just made a move in this game from the 1800s and said check. There's a check on the board. Do you see it? Look for a minute. I was reminded of this the other day. I collect antique chess books, and I was going through an old chess book from the 1800s in which a move was illustrated with, I was reading the notation. There was a move, and it said check. And I looked at the board for the longest time and could not find a check. It was driving me insane. And then I remembered an old custom from the 1800s that we don't see very often anymore. I've seen it, I believe, twice in my tournament career. White has just moved and announced check. Do you see it? Well, I'll show you the move. I'll back up one move. White plays this and says check. Back in the 1800s, it was customary to say check when you attacked your opponent's king, but also when you attacked your opponent's queen. We don't do that anymore. I've seen it twice. Once was a game I played against a fellow who was from Eastern Europe, and he was about 3 days older than Methuselah. I mean, this was 20 years ago, and that fellow was probably 90 if he was a day. And I made a move, and then he made a move that attacked my queen, and he went check to the queen. And I kind of looked at him. I said, I smiled. I appreciated the gesture. I really did. But I said, we don't have to say that anymore. I mean, that's not the custom anymore. He goes, I know, but I just like to do it because it's courteous. And, normally that's the antithesis of most chess players. Normally a chess player will make a move attacking his opponent's queen and sit there and go, don't see it, don't see it, don't see it, please don't see it, don't see it, let me take his queen, please. But back then you announced it. You said check to the queen. Another time it happened to me was I was playing against a young fella where he made a move and attacked my queen and said check to the queen. And I said the same thing, we don't have to say that anymore. And he said, yeah, but you know what? He said, when I learned to play this game, I played against a really old guy. He's the guy that taught me, this really old fella, and he taught me to say check to the queen, and I've done it ever since, and I think it's a nice gesture. So it's kind of cool. So back then you said check to the king, check to the queen, but in the 1800s, you didn't say check to the queen, you used a French term when you did it, and that term was garder la dame. So back when this game was played, and by the way, we'll go back to notation, show you when it was. It was London, 1819, Lewis against Williams. We don't know for sure, but it's likely that William Lewis, when he played this, said, "Gardez la dame," which is a French term, means guard your queen, obviously. And that later became anglicized. Just like je deux became adjust, "Gardez la dame" became check to the queen. Now, this isn't used anymore. It's been 20 years since I've heard anybody say check to the queen. I've never heard anybody say "Gardez la dame." And sometimes when I'm playing a beginner, though, I've used it when I'm playing a beginner and I want to call their attention to the fact I'm attacking their queen. I will say "Gardez la dame," just because it's cool. And when they ask me what it means, I get to give them the same boring history lesson that I just gave to you. So lucky them, lucky you. So I just wanted to hit you with a couple things. This would have been a great written article if I was still writing articles. Unfortunately, I do videos now, so I have to tell the story. But I hope you found that to be mildly entertaining. And I hope you learned something also. Going back to Fritz, don't forget that if you're playing an online game and you're waiting for your opponent to move and you're pretty sure what his move is going to be, you can hover your piece, pick the piece up, hover it over the square you'd like to drop it on, and as soon as they move, drop the piece, and you can save clock time that way. It's called hovering. There's a bunch of terms for it, and it's an old online trick, and it is legal in Fritz when you're using Fritz as your interface to play on the Play Chess server. Till next time for Chess Base Workshop, I'm Steve Lopez, reminding you to please do have fun.